Hello, my dear viewers. Welcome to the Moszkowicz Show. And today I have a very special guest. He is the Vice President of ICER, and he's from the UK. He's pretty well known in the UFO community, in the UAP world. He's an investigator. He's a former police officer, a interviewer. Um, he writes a lot, and he's one of the key players in UFO disclosure. So let me introduce you to drum roll, Mr. Gary Heseltine. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me on, Max.
Well, it's my pleasure, and it's way overdue. We were planning on
I
doing
was
this.
thinking that, to be honest.
Yeah, it was, and it's all my fault, by the way. Um, but we're here now.
We're here now.
We're here now. So let me give a short backstory on the two of us, because also I do have a surprise for the audience, because me and Mr. Heseltine have met before in San Marino last September when I was filming Mr. Elizondo, and ICER had the symposium over there. Of course, Mr. Heseltine was there. We met up, and something very special happened actually when I did my last live interview with Mr. Elizondo. A lot happened. The NDAA report dropped. We got it in live in the episode. Lou was very excited. I was very excited, and we saw someone was listening in to our interview, and that was Gary. And immediately when the camera switched off, Gary and Lou started talking to each other, and I got to capture it on camera. So, my dear audience, that conversation will be uploaded directly after this show. So it's my little surprise to you guys. So, Gary, maybe let's start with that. What was it like for you to be at the ICER symposium in San Marino, and what was it like for you to meet Lou for the first time?
Yeah, it was kind of bizarre how it all happened. I mean, I had interviewed Lue Elizondo on behalf of ICER when he attended an online Zoom meeting with our various representatives. I think in the early part of May, a couple of weeks before we went public on the 25th of May. So we'd had this kind of informal chat with him, and because I was kind of like the nominated person to ask him all the questions, so I had that one-to-one. But obviously, a Zoom is good, better than a phone call, but obviously not the same as meeting somebody. So obviously, I kind of sensed that we might have a good rapport. And then when I realized that he was going to San Marino, I obviously looked forward to meeting him. Now, as I expected, when I got to San Marino, we're there for 3-4 days. He was pretty much being pursued all the time by cameramen, whatever, people filming him. So, yeah. So actually having a one-to-one with him was pretty nigh impossible. And what happened during that time, and I did meet him. We introduced ourselves over breakfast in the hotel. We're staying in the same hotel. But, there was lots of other people about. Didn't really get a one-to-one chance, which is what I wanted to do. And then, as luck would have it, during the course of the conference, I'd say hello in passing. He was doing a lecture. I was doing a lecture. And then I thought, well, I wonder where Lou is. And I thought, I wonder if he's back at the hotel. And I knew that the likes of yourself was wanting to interview him. So I thought, well, if you don't try, you don't find out anything. So I took the chance.
You are a detective. You are a detective.
Well, I think you've got to follow your instinct. And I thought he might be doing interviews at the hotel. So I went back to the hotel. And in the lobby area of the hotel, I saw you doing a live podcast, which you just referred to. And then, of course, I could see that you were all animated and excited about the NDA report that had come in. And then, of course, as soon as you came out of that, I then took the opportunity to talk to Lou. And so what you capture is our absolute first one-to-one. Now, what I would have to say is that there are some edits in there that I asked you to do because it was private one-to-one and we touched on ICER things, etc., which wouldn't be prudent to show in its entirety. But I asked you to do the edits. But yeah, that you captured something pretty unique. So that was the very first time I had a one-to-one for any length of time, and it was probably what 35 minutes, something like that. And it was a great chat. And he comes from a sort of specialist role in intelligence. I come from a former RAF police, military police, and then as a police detective. So we kind of had some kind of rapport.
You guys,
and we
were,
got on well. I think you can see in the interview that we kind of like had a nice little rapport going.
You guys were immediately kind of bonding because of that.
Yeah.
You know, you had similar occupations before, different but similar.
Yeah.
And
there was a mutual level of respect.
Definitely,
because of our backgrounds. Yeah,
definitely. And I actually saw Lou. He knew who you were, and I definitely felt Lou. You know, he was kind of hesitant in he was like really weighing his words, I guess, because you actually touched down on the fact in that conversation you interviewed terrorists and stuff, and so you told him, I know every trick in the book, and so it was kind of like two heavyweights was like Foreman and Ali having a face off or something, but it was very friendly.
It was a really good rapport that we immediately hit it off. And I will say is we've stayed in contact, and I've subsequently had other video private interviews with him on video since, on Zoom and things like that. And so we, hopefully that will continue. But yeah, we've got a good, healthy respect for each other, and I think that's good. You want that, and the fact that he felt comfortable talking to me, and you could see that as we spoke, that he began to relax, and he was really excited about the information that had come in that day.
We all were. It was quite astonishing, actually. And for Lou, I think it was I think he was actually really relieved that came in, because it, validated a lot of the things he was working on saying.
Yeah.
And I felt there was a weight that fell off his shoulders.
Yeah, it did validate a lot of what he was trying to achieve, and obviously, as we'll probably touch on later on in the show, down the line, just a few months down the line, we now have this historic GRG amendment that was passed on December the 15th.
Yeah,
absolutely historic. That we'll talk about in a bit, but he is a key. I know he has a lot of people who are suspicious. I think everybody was suspicious, myself included. Everybody
you were.
Yes, because you've got to be, because don't forget he was a disinformation specialist. So
that's what you told him.
And well, that kind of says, well, he's an expert in putting out disinformation. That's what he does. But you have to look at it in the context of what he's doing in this subject. And what I perceive and what I've witnessed myself is that he's only been a power of good since he came forward in 2017. Chris Mellon, they've just been a power of good, and so many people are so cynical now that that they're saying it's got to be a con. Well, if it's a con, well, he's doing a pretty good job, because everything that they've tried to do, as from my point of view, from an evidential kind of background, has all been to get where we are now. And I recently put out 15 key points in the history to mark the 4-year anniversary of the 16th of December New York Times article. And he is instrumental in pretty much all of those. So for those people who are still his detractors, that I'd say, well, what is he doing wrong? I don't see any evidence that he's done wrong. And if anything, he's been the real catalyst to get the information out there and to try to make governments more accountable. And in that sense, where we're up to now is that's worked tremendously, because with the GRG amendment being passed, that now makes the intelligence world finally accountable to Congress and the Senate. We never had that before. It was the other way around. We were dependent on the intelligence services, what they released. And obviously, the Airborne Identification and Management Synchronization Group, which was put out by the Pentagon just a few days before, would have been a retrograde step seen by many, including Lue Elizondo, who spoke out against it, because it would have been the intelligence services saying, well, we'll give you what we want. Whereas when the GRG amendment went in, it then forced it 180 degrees to say, no, you will be required every year to submit twice yearly a classified report to the Senate Congress and one unclassified report to the public every year. We never had that before. So this is a unique, absolutely historic. And from my point of view, I actually think that 2021 goes down as the most important year in ufology in history.
I do
Because
think
there
so.
were
I agree.
so many legal things that took place, and unprecedented.
Yeah, unprecedented. And I do think what happened there, then and there in San Marino, where you and me both were witness to.
It was just uncanny. But in a sense, you make your own luck. If I hadn't gone back to the hotel, I wouldn't have just dropped in on that unique live moment that just come in on your show. How lucky was that? You could have done the show at any other time and missed it. But it just happened that he got the message during your show. So that's, a lot of people, when I first got into this subject, people would say, yeah, well, that's synchronicity. And I'd say, well, I've never heard of that word before. You mean coincidence? And they say, no, synchronicity means that it's like meant to be. And I was dismissive of that at first. But over the years, and I've now been a public researcher since January of 2002, so almost, 20 years. All the things over the years, thank you, all the years that have happened since then, I've now come to believe that there is the word synchronicity is the most apt word, because there has been, certainly in my life, too many bizarre coincidences that have brought me to the place where I am now.
Well, Gary, I think I see our friend Vinny Adams is in the chat room. Hey, Vinny.
Hello, Vinny.
Hey, Vinny. But there was something when we were both on Vinny's. You said something there, and I didn't forget it. And it was like, you create your own faith, right?
You can create your own destiny.
Destiny, destiny.
You can affect your own reality by making certain decisions. For example, just a quick example will be, if you want to change your life and you want to do something different, you can say, right, I want to try dancing. I'll go dancing. And then you meet your partner, who turns out to be the love of your life for the rest of your life. If you hadn't have made that decision, you wouldn't have changed your reality. And in a sense, all the things that happened to me that led me to become a public UFO researcher investigator were really strange. And that led me to becoming a researcher and going public at the age of 42, which is bizarre. Even though I'd had a sighting when I was a child at 16. So life works in mysterious ways. But I do believe, and have come to believe over many years, that in a sense, what I do and what other people do is almost chosen. And I'm not religious in any way, but there is, I guess, a spiritual spin to that. I don't believe in God in that sense, but it does feel as if you are on a path to do something. And it's weird.
Yeah, there's definitely, I feel the same, but the problem is, can't explain it.
Yeah,
that's the problem. But I'm a very instinctive person, so I just go with it.
And I think that's a really good way to do. Sometimes you get a gut feeling, and you have to go with it.
That's what it is.
And I say to people, if you think that the gut feeling is right for you, then go with it, because it might be the only opportunity you get in life, and it might be the wrong decision, but at least you've followed it.
Gary, it started with me nagging my editor-in-chief for a magazine to cover the 2017 New York Times article. By the way, got denied. It was when that guy got fired. He was actually a really cool dude, but he didn't want any UFO stuff. The new editor-in-chief came in, and he allowed me to cover it, and that's when it snowballed, right? It just.
So again, for you, it's a bizarre set of circumstances that this guy getting fired allowed you and a different editor to come in and say, Max, go for it, and that changed your rules.
It was exactly at the right time. It was in the 180-day ultimatum. I got to cover it all the way, and ended up with you and Lou in San Marino, and
that's how this subject goes. And I've talked to a lot of other researchers about how they got involved, and there are many, many similar stories of strange events occurring in their lives that brought them on a path to do what we're doing now. And it does kind of feel weird, but I kind of just go with the flow now, because I just accept that it's like, this is my task. And,
exactly.
And I'm doing a role, and other people are doing different roles.
Yeah. So, hey, Sean Raj, he's paying me money. Thank you, Sean. What is the best evidence you found that proves another life form is here on Earth? I think that's for you, Gary.
Yeah, no. It's too simplistic a question, because the real answer is nobody in the public domain has an alien body to say, there you go. Nobody has an alien spaceship in the background garage going, there you go. So it's not that either. So really, the real answer, and going from my police evidential background, is what I would call the circumstantial evidence case. And that is built on what I would call the best evidential material. And the best evidential material, in my eyes, comes from the likes of military pilots, commercial pilots, private pilots, radar operators, sonar operators, air traffic controllers. And when they're backed up by telemetry data, radar data, videos, etc., when you put that all together over the last 70 years, personally, I think any intelligent person should arrive at the conclusion that there is something going on in our skies, and it isn't terrestrial. But it depends on your perspective. So that would be my say. It's not a simple answer. It's a circumstantial evidence answer. But let me also say that in every court in what we call the Western world, European law, etc., most cases are argued on circumstantial evidence. It's very rare that you get to court, the highest courts, Crown courts, etc., with all the evidence. You have pieces of a jigsaw. You think you have enough pieces of the jigsaw to put before a jury, and then they make their mind up. But it's pieces of a jigsaw, and the prosecution argue more often than not a circumstantial evidence case, and that's what most cases decided upon. So what is the difference? It's only when we talk about UFOs and that's the stigma that's been attached to this subject for 60, 70 years since the Robertson panel in 1953. That's where the stigma comes from, if people aren't aware. It was deliberate, CIA orchestrated. How do we get rid of the subject? We start debunking it and decry anybody who believes in it. And that system of debunking worked fantastically well, aided by the media, who I think really were complicit in it. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, but they're not doing enough now. They should be doing a lot more now in light of all these historic things that's going on. But yeah, it's the circumstantial evidence case that would weigh up any murder, manslaughter, rape, or whatever terrorist case. You never have all the pieces. You have pieces of the jigsaw. And that's what we've got with ufology for the last 70 years. And if you put the best pieces together, it creates one hell of a compelling narrative to say we are not alone, or at least being interacted with some non-human intelligence.
Yeah. So you did state, I think it was actually a official ICER state. Let me see if I can pull it up. That you're pretty sure extraterrestrial life is or already has been on Earth, right?
Yeah, basically what we said was, when we went public, every one of our representatives and deputies have had to sign the same oath, and that oath basically said, when we look at the evidence accumulated over the last 70 years, we conclude that there is something going on for real. It's a real phenomenon, and that we think it's more than likely to be extraterrestrial or non-human, which means it could be interdimensional or whatever.
Yeah. So if
that's the premise.
Yeah. So if I understand you right, it's an accumulation of small pieces of puzzle that make you
the
believe
amount of data that comes together to create this huge body of material. When you think that there are something like, I believe, over 4,500 pilot reports now worldwide gone on the record. I think 2,000 of those are military pilots. Probably another 1,500 are commercial pilots. You've got hundreds of radar reports, hundreds of air traffic controllers who've gone on the record. When you add all that with the telemetry data, the length and duration, the visual, when you get say, for example, 3 or 4 planes going in different directions, all looking at the same thing, being captured on 5 or 6 ground radars, all independent of each other, all different types of radar. You've got that visual confirmation, you've got the radar confirmation, you've got the ground and airborne radar confirmation. Then you are dealing with something that's real. And the beauty of this now is actually nobody, the skeptics can't argue with that anymore since 2017 with the release of the 3 FLIR videos, because for the first time, and it's not the New York Times article that was the game changer, although it's huge as a catalyst, but it was those 3 videos, in my opinion, they're the things that were the genie out of the bottle, because for the first time, not for the public, but for the media, for the first time, those 3 videos, the media could look at those and go, especially on the last one, the Go Fast, where it's skimming across the surface of the water. Oh, I got it. And he's like tracking it, and you can hear the excitement. And for the first time, I think that the mainstream media could go, genuinely, what is that?
Yeah.
They never had that before because it wasn't authenticated by the military. So that's been the huge, biggest thing for me. Without those 3 videos, I don't think we'd have got anywhere near the GRG amendment. Those are absolutely crucial pieces of evidence, visual evidence, backed up by the telemetry data, backed up by the visual seen by 4 pilots, backed up by the radar data by the likes of Kevin Day, etc., on the Princeton. So, you know, you have all this data. And when we talk about the DNI report that came out on the 25th of June, a lot of people who don't follow the subject that closely but are interested go, oh, it was only 9 pages. Yes, it was only 9 pages, and we hope
but
for
144 sightings.
Yeah. But they missed the big puzzle was for them to say that only 1 of the 144 cases was identified was a huge headline that the press actually grabbed onto. So 143, and what they actually meant was 143 pilot cases, often daylight pilot cases. 143 pilots could not identify what they're looking at in broad daylight that's captured on sensor data and on radar data, etc. Now that's pretty staggering. And so it's reading between the lines. I mean, it said 80 were caught on multiple sensor equipment. That's brilliant corroborative evidence. And then I think it said 18 showed technology that's actually not yet invented or appears to. You know, so within that brief 9-page report, there's some real nuggets. So you have to go back there, and I would suggest to anybody to go back there and read between the lines. And I think the fact that they let it launch on the premise of we can only identify 1 of 144 was actually for the press to pick up on, which they did, fortunately. And that's a huge, big thing. And again, you know, once you had in the run up to that release, you had people like the 60 Minutes do the 14-minute segment. 60 Minutes is like the premier US documentary serious news coverage. Absolutely huge. And so when they did that, and the you know, the guy who introduced it at the start said, I can't believe I'm doing this segment, but here we are. We're in a different world. But he did that, and they had the pilots on, you know, it was huge for the subject.
Actually, I think Alex Dietrich stole the show.
Oh, she did. She did.
And
the fact that she'd just come out literally a week or 2 before was perfect for that show.
Perfect.
And the fact that they sat next to each other and corroborated each other, you know, and it's really powerful when Commander Four he says that, and he does this with his finger. He said, as I'm coming down to the tic tac, it flipped and looked at me, as it were, as I'm spiraling it down, and it started to mimic me, and then gone. I mean, this is just great testimony from a guy who's a Top Gun pilot. You know, you can't get better than these guys.
These are
the best of the best.
Elite human beings. You do not get to fly those planes if you're a regular person. No, you have to be extremely intelligent.
And taking it back to the 143 pilots, now put it in the context of 143 pilots flying the most sophisticated aircraft in the US military catalogue, still can't identify what they're looking at. That's damning. That's absolutely damning.
Now, as a former police officer, Gary, when you look at like debunker logic, they tend to zoom in on individual cases, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't look at the whole. They just look at individual cases, and they don't really debunk. They simply offer a alternative explanation without actually providing evidence that this is not what is said, or if it's unexplainable. Now, we were just talking about the way you look at it. You clearly look at this topic as a police officer. You have to have your data, your eyewitnesses. You have to have your technology.
Yep.
So how frustrating is it to you when you hear some guy just zoom in on an individual case and just simply offer a alternative explanation?
I look at this, I can only look at this in one way. I had 6 years in the Royal Air Force Police, 3 years guarding nuclear weapons, and then I had a 24-year career with the British Transport Police, and the last 19 years I was a Home Office trained detective and became an advanced interviewer. That was my kind of thing. I didn't want to go higher. I liked being at the sharp end, and I really liked interviewing. But so from my point of view, I've got 30 years of collective policing background. I can only look at this subject through evidential eyes, and that's what I say to people. People just want, well, show me the body, and this is a typical skeptic kind of line, or dismissive. Well, show me the body, then I'll believe. Well, it's just too much of a throwaway line. But this is my experience of skeptics. Skeptics give you some of the evidence. They don't give you all of the evidence in which to base your decision. They're very selective, and what they do and have done for decades is they take a piece of evidence that fits their chosen excuse, narrative, and then they build a story around it to try to put it forward. Now, in the past, prior to 2017, in the New York Times article and the Fleur videos, the press would give huge amount of credence to these flimsy, crazy, skeptical arguments. And let's just talk and digress. And there's no bigger example of that than the Rendlesham Forest incident, of which I've been a public researcher since December 2007.
We will talk about that.
all of these documentaries that have been made, 50, 60 documentaries, TV documentaries to date, still talk about a lighthouse as being a possibility. It was crazy. You're looking at multiple incidents, 14, 15 incidents, that I will have you know, separate incidents of UFOs seen over those days, many incidents. It's not just one lighthouse. Plus, there was a barrier that stopped the beam coming in towards the sea. Most people don't even realise that. It was blocked off and it only went out to sea. It didn't come inland. But it's like the skeptics or the media at that time, prior to 2017, you could say anything about Rendlesham and you get in the papers. But if you're a researcher doing good research and saying, oh, I've got this really good piece of evidence that now says this is a real event, the press aren't interested. But they were always interested in printing the negative material to keep that mystery going, because the press and TV in the end, and this is what I've learned over being involved in many documentaries, is that TV makes entertainment.
Right.
Entertainment first. The truth, well, we'll give you some of the truth. We won't lie, but we'll just leave some of the evidence out, and we'll just create this narrative that says, well, yeah, there's a lot of pilots saw this, a lot of military people saw this, but was it the lighthouse? We'll never know. Well, they do know, but they just don't present all the evidence. And I think one of the frustrations has been, prior to 2017, that's how the media worked, that's how the skeptics worked. Now, it's very hard now, in light of the 3 Fleur videos, in light of all the legislation going through now, for people to try to do that, because now there is a benchmark that says, no, actually, these 40-foot Tic Tac things have been proven to be flying around in the US airspace. 40-foot long, no wings, no tail, no obvious engines, etc., propulsion systems, and they're doing weird and wonderful maneuvers. It's a done deal. They are real. The question only now is, where are they from and what do they want? And the where are they from is where we're at now in terms of the media, because the media, who have such a hard time getting their heads around the best evidence, because they've been so complicit for so many years, they're now entertain this, but they still find it very hard to do so because it's been stigmatized for so long. It's like inbuilt into your mind. No, there can't be anything to this. Well, there actually seems to be, and
Well, it's
you
also
can see them
having
struggle.
to. It's also having to admit to being a dick, you know.
Well, I don't think they would say that on the BBC News, you know.
No.
Although it may well be a true good description, but yeah, the point is the
it.
world has changed, and they're
Yeah.
struggling to deal with it, and they would still, at the moment, want to believe that it's new Chinese or Russian technology rather than deal with the fifth category of other, which is what the DNI report created, the task force reported. But the reality is, if you talk to Chris Mellon, you talk to Lue Elizondo, they'll all say, well, the evidence is it's less than 1% that it's China or Russia because of the data that's been accumulated, the evidential data. And what did Lue Elizondo say on the 60 Minutes program? You're dealing something that flies at 13,000 miles an hour, pulls 600-700 Gs, can be transmedium, go underwater. None of these things that we can do with terrestrial technology. It's just too fast. So, you know, so the reality is now that people like Avi Loeb from Harvard and the Galileo project have now launched into this. They wouldn't have come anywhere near this 4 years ago, 5 years ago, if it wasn't for the New York Times article and those FLIR videos. But now the stigma is lifting. It's still not gone yet because it's still embedded into most people's brains. But in a couple of years, it will be totally gone. But we are on, I think now, especially with the GRG amendment being passed, that now secures the unclassified report yearly and the 2 classified reports. The momentum coming each year now and the anticipation, like coming up to the 180-day report in June, is going to grow and grow. And I think that there's going to be more videos being released. I mean, Lue Elizondo has said that he's seen daylight footage of an object flying in broad daylight 50 feet from the cockpit of a plane. You know, my argument is, well, you can take away all the sensor instrument. We don't need to see anything, but give us the image, because the image is, surely that's a right in the public domain. And especially now that we're admitting that these things are real, we should be looking at this footage now. It should be released.
This is exactly the big breakthrough, I think, because this is the paradigm shift, right?
So we're on the edge of a paradigm shift.
Yeah, well, it's kind of there already, because
not until you get the media on board and everybody accepting it.
Well,
that's
because of it's actually more political paradigm shift because of the Gillibrand thing. Because now we're not talking about either these things are real or not. No, they're real. Now we're talking about what is it?
Yeah,
where is it from? So that's huge.
Huge, yes, but that's not really been reported by the media. And since the DNI report, there was loads of coverage in the run-up to the 25th of June release report. But since the 25th of June, in terms of TV coverage in the States, in the UK, in the areas that I know, very disappointing. And, you know, the GRG should have been on the 6 o'clock news, and everybody should have been saying, wow, this should be on the main news now. This is historic. But it hasn't been, as far as I can see. It's not all over the American news networks. Yes, there's been some sporadic reporting, but it should have been a big deal. So
I have a funny story for you.
Yeah, well, until the way I look at it, until it's on 24/7 on every news channel, like a terrorist incident. If you think of 9/11, 24/7 coverage, days, weeks. When you get that breakthrough, that's the big disclosure day. That's when you know UFOs have hit home.
I have a funny story for you on that note. A couple of months ago, I was approached by the Dutch equivalent of BBC News or CNN.
Yep.
Now, they had to find me because they wanted to get a hold of Lue Elizondo. Now, in all of Dutch journalism, in Dutch media, there was no one who was in touch with Lue. So they had to approach me. And I am the only guy, actually, who really covered the UAP topic for a national magazine, which is Nieuwe Revue magazine, plug. That magazine was actually, had the, let's say in Spanish, cojones to covering this topic. Now, it's funny how that worked, because like a lot of people in let's say colleagues were saying, man, why are you covering that? You're committing career suicide. Are you talking about UFOs? Are you out of your damn mind? So, but I persisted, and I went, because I knew I was talking to very trained and very highly placed men and women. So why not talk to them? Why not, even if it's not true? As a journalist, your job is to find out the damn truth, right? If it were real or not, you have to cover it, because if it were true, it's going to change humanity. It's going to change humankind.
It's the biggest story in the world.
It is. Story. So I'm, I have been all in since day one, and because I know that if this is the case, you're going to be sorry you didn't jump into this.
Yes.
So, and
I think there will be a lot of red faces down the line, and I certainly think that there are a lot of governments now who, in light of probably the GRG amendment, in light of the DNI report, etc., they're quietly having discussions behind the scenes. I have absolutely no doubt that it's like this is going to be something that's cropping up in the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner. And the way I look at it is that there is a huge momentum gathering now. And I've always said that the disclosure is like a dam. And there's a huge body of water behind it. And a few of the bricks have loosened in the middle of that dam. And the pressure is growing on the weak point. And eventually all that will happen is that the momentum will get so strong that more bricks will come out, and then it will collapse. And that's when you go from one day we're talking about it, the next day it's 24/7. I think it will be that kind of breakthrough. And maybe another UFO event, another Nimitz case, but real time, that's happened 2 days ago, makes that final push where the coverage can't be denied. We're getting very, very close, but that momentum now, especially with the GRG amendment being passed, is now pushing us on a road to this new paradigm. And I don't see how you can dismiss it for much longer. And the mainstream media, who are not doing their job, in my opinion now, they need to start thinking we have to, because we are on the edge of something that's huge.
Well, now this is interesting because this brings me back to San Marino. Because when Lue was speaking at the symposium, he was talking about the 5 pillars, right?
Yeah.
So it's clear the bigger media channels, the news agencies, etc., they're not covering that. Yeah, maybe Fox a little bit.
Yeah.
Through Carlson Tucker, but like in worldwide, it's not being covered.
Yeah.
So the way for Mr. Elizondo, Mr. Mellon, rest in peace, Mr. Reed, to actually get this out into the open was through, smaller channels like even podcasters who are not even journalists.
They realize that podcast is a new medium that's very popular, and the YouTube world, the podcast world is huge now, and so they see it as an opportunity to get younger people.
It was brilliant.
To get involved. Brilliant. It's a great strategy, and that's like the disclosure team with Vinny Adams. Obviously, he's doing great work as well. You're doing great work. It's a new breed. And we need to get younger people involved, because if you look at the average age of people who attend conferences, it's 45 plus. Now, often it's 50 plus, and that's no good. We need to be able to stimulate younger people to come into this. And this is unfortunately, and I'm not a big lover of social media, although it can have great advantages. There's many downsides to social media. One of them is apathy, because you've got everything at your fingertips. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to march anywhere. You can just register your disapproval with an online vote, and it's all very sedate and very civilized. Well, unfortunately, the world in the past was all about people making change, and not enough people make the change now because they're armchair experts. And of course, with the wealth of unregulated material out there, the amount of CGI UFO stuff out there, 99.9 is all CGI, and I just say CGI. you do occasionally get some good stuff, but it mars genuine research. And yet people are making a lot of money. And I can think of certain websites that make millions off it. But that's their business. It's not me.
Gary, like one of the bigger thinkers of our time said something interesting about that a couple of weeks ago. His name is Mike Tyson, former heavyweight champion of the world.
Go on.
So Mike said, social media, or let's say, is a weapon for cancel culture, right? So whenever you were talking about the armchair internet warriors, and they just don't even do research, are not really interested. They just want to,
it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, very, very dangerous. So what Mike Tyson said is like, so people, they can destroy you on the internet. In the old days, when they wanted to confront you, they had to like show up at your house or and
send you a letter or something.
Yeah, something like that. But the risk of actually confronting someone in real life is, they can handle that like right then and right there. And in the case of Mike Tyson, you will get punched in the damn face. So that's the way it goes these days.
Look, all I can say of social media is that for 4 years I've been trolled by a certain minority group, all because I took a stance on a certain witness in the Rendlesham Forest incident, even though I have the evidence to back it up. They're not interested in the evidence, but those people who are obviously all blocked and things like that, but they're hugely verbal. You're a F this, you're an F this, you're swearing at you. The world should be on social media totally regulated, and you should not be able to call somebody a liar, a con man, a fraud, or whatever, unless you can prove it in a court of law. Because these people at the moment, because it's unregulated, can say what they like. And of course, because of the armchair culture, people go, well, it must be right then. Oh, if she said it, then it must be right. And this is a very dangerous culture. And if we go into maybe the political side and the debate about Trump and the 6th of January and things like that, which is 6th of January today, it's a very dangerous medium where you don't actually look at evidence. Or if you look at evidence and then twist it, and then nobody does the due diligence to check that it's twisted. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's like a form of street justice, but on internet, right?
Yeah, it's trial by internet, which is ridiculous.
Trial
by internet.
Exactly. Now let's move to a more personal conversation. So we were talking about instinct and where it takes you. One of the things I've experienced is when I started to cover this, I had my first sighting. Okay. So I hadn't had a sighting ever before, but it was when I started looking up, because I was talking to people like you, Lou, Melon, or whatever. It's you start to look up, and that's when I saw something, and I actually saw more after that, but that's another conversation. But you said it was young you at 16 years old who had a sighting. I know you've talked about this before, but would you mind, for the Dutchies or people who haven't heard the story, could you maybe elaborate on it a little bit?
Yeah, a quick version would be, I was born in Scunthorpe in Lincolnshire, which is just a small rural county, really. Anyway, my one summer's evening, I think it was August of 1976, I was walking my then girlfriend home. At one point, we had to take a long, narrow footpath that was next to my high school, my comprehensive school, as it was called then. And so as we're walking past, literally with the school fields on our left, on the other side, there was a huge, what we would say, allotment, which where people grow vegetables, etc. And this footpath went through, and it was probably about 600 or 700 meters long. And at the end of it, there was a housing estate, so you could see all the housing. But at the time, in 1976, there was no street lighting along this footpath. So it was pretty dark. And you could see everything, the sky clear. There was no light pollution. So at the darkest point, we happened to look up and see what I can only describe as a bright white light, maybe a 60-degree angle, moving right to left. So if you can imagine walking straight path and straight forward, and then this object no noise, no real distinct shape, but much larger than the background stars. And then literally as we became the path, and then it went past us, everything in the distance, housing, behind the flight path of the object, power cut. Really, really weird. And the girl I was with, called Dawn at the time, she immediately became frightened and associated the light with causing something, the power cut, rightly or wrongly. We watched, it went a bit further, another power cut behind it, moving very slowly, no noise. And it's generally moving very slowly, silently in the direction of my home. Now, at the time, I was pushing my bicycle. So we're walking and I'm pushing my bicycle. As soon as this light seemed to cause these power outages, I said, right, get on the crossbar. I'm going to ride quickly to your house, drop you off, and then I'm going to try to catch it up because it was moving slowly enough that there was a chance I'd be able to do it. So that's what we did. 2 on the bike, went to the alleyway, turned right about 200 or 300 meters further to the right. At the end of the alleyway was her parents. Dropped her off. They're all looking for candles. It's in complete darkness. I then get back on the bike, race like mad, go back down the same alleyway, race like mad, going like the clappers, as we would say in England. I get onto what was called, I forget the road now because I ain't living in Scunthorpe now. But I basically turned right onto Grange Lane South, turned right into Grange Lane South, past my high school, in the direction of where the object was. And the entire area is totally black, no power. It is black, and I'm racing like mad. And then in the distance, by a bend near to my home, a left-hand gentle bend to my left, I see that the power is on. So if you can imagine going from an area of complete darkness, and then in the distance, as you're approaching, you can see the power still on at that point. I get to that bend, and as I get to the left-hand bend, I don't know why, but I instinctively look over my right shoulder as I go from the darkness into the light, and I see that I've managed to get ahead of the light, just. So I go around, so that's maybe why there hadn't been a power outage. So anyway, so I go, turn left round the bend, I go maybe another 70, 80 meters, then turn right onto Westerdale Road, another 50, 100 meters, turn right onto Baysdale Road. I lived at number 3, which is at the beginning of that. So literally 200 or 300 meters further to go from that bend. And then I'm dropping my bike outside. I rush into my parents, who are having a cup of tea, supper time. So I guess it's 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, which is a custom. And I say, come outside. I think there might be a power cut caused by this strange white light. And they just look at me bemused. They don't get up. They think I'm crazy. So I rush through the hall. I go into the kitchen. I go through the back door into the garden. I go to the bottom of my semi-detached garden. I turn around to look at the house just in time to see this object coming over my rooftop at a much higher altitude. And for some reason, and I don't know why, it's all weird, I put my hand up like I'm answering a question in class, straight up. And as soon as the object went past my arm, i.e. the 90 degrees, as it were, so it went beyond me and I'm behind it, entire area, to the split second, into darkness. Now, how the hell am I going to be able to predict a power cut? It's ridiculous. So I knew that at that point there, having moved about a mile geographically from one position to a second geographical position, that light, whatever it was, and I'm saying it was a spaceship, but whatever that light was, that interacted with the power grid, because it was absolutely ridiculous for me to predict a power cut. But I'm telling you, at the point it went past the 90 degrees, power cut for about half an hour. My parents just put it down to coincidence. We're talking a long time ago, 1976. We weren't even on the phone then. So I can't even call anybody. And in fact, if I did want to call anybody, who do I call? Is there a UFO hotline? No, I don't think so. So there was nothing in place, in the sense, who you would automatically know who to ring. So I didn't do anything about it. And my parents just put it down to coincidence. But from that event, that got me interested. And the first thing that I did after that incident, and the only thing that I could do in 1976, it was just prior to the video age of video cassettes and things like that, Betamax, VHS, was go to a second-hand bookshop and look for books on UFOs. And here's the really strange coincidence that I look back on now as being one of the catalysts, is the very first book that I got, and there have been thousands and thousands of books written about UFOs, was the 5th book by Major Donald Kehoe, who turns out to be one of my ultimate heroes in disclosure, who in
Yeah.
the 50s was the guy who created NICAP, who was a major in the army and had lots of military contacts, and he was basically saying on live TV in the 50s and got cut off, you know, we're talking something that's extraterrestrial. And so he's a hero for me. And that's freaky that the very first book that I got was by Major Donald Keogh, and I'll never forget that. And it was his fifth and last book. I could have chosen any book, but that was the very first book. And I think that's, again, a strange coincidence that's led me on this path to where I am now. You know, but when I kind of look back and pinch myself, that I recently, in an ICER capacity, sat down with my first minister meeting, the San Marino government culture minister. You know, for a little guy from Scunthorpe, you know, it's kind of bizarre the weird and wonderful way that things are working out. But you know, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. It's a strange tale.
Now let's rewind a little bit from San Marino. So I guess you know the fascination was born right then and there. 16-year-old Gary.
Yep.
Walking home his girl.
Yep.
Then you became a cop.
Not until I was 23. Prior to that, I'd done a variety of jobs. I worked at Scunthorpe, was a big steelworks place, so I worked at steelworks, then did some sales jobs. But yeah, 23, I joined the Royal Air Force for 6 years. 29, I joined the police.
Still pretty young, actually, 23 years old.
By then I had a mortgage. I had a mortgage at 18 and a child at 18, so I started things young.
Dude, 18?
18. Oh, she was born 3 days before I was 18, so 17 technically.
Wow, that is young. That is young. So a lot of responsibility.
Yep.
Well, congratulations, a cop by 23. But did you ever share your story with your colleagues? And of course, later on, you became more active as a researcher. Maybe was this topic something you could talk about? Because of course you emphasized a lot on police sightings, right?
That's how I became known in the subject, because in January 2000, I created the Prufos Police Database, which is just UK police officers. That's where the media became involved, and people started to say, "Come and talk to our UFO group."
Well, it's so important. It's incredibly important because cops are the ones people call whenever they see something, and cops
absolutely
are the one. Yeah, so that's essential, basically.
It doesn't mean that every police sighting is 100% ET or UFO. They're fallible like everybody else, but what makes it more impressive is when you have multiple police officers, often in different geographical positions, several cars viewing the same object from 2 miles away. You know,
can I share something with you?
Yeah, go on. Go ahead.
So, I did the Dutch equivalent of a FOIA request to our defense forces, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't share a lot, but what they did share was that whenever there was a sighting by civilians, they would call the police, and the police would call the military tower in New Millingen, which is in Holland. So it's usually the police calling in sightings.
Yeah, absolutely. Because unless you live next to a military base where you may know the number, which is often the case if you live local to a military base, you'll often have the number to ring in case there's some kind of accident or something like that. Yeah. But generally, in terms of the public, they're more likely to call the police. So the police would generally, certainly in the UK, the police would take a report over the phone, or if somebody went into the police station, and they would fill in a pro forma, which was a very poor pro forma that actually had come from the Ministry of Defence in the UK and had been in existence really without being changed for about 50 years. And that's how it operated for more than 50 years until the Ministry of Defence suddenly decided to close the UFO desk in December of 2009. But yeah, that's all that was done. In those days, it was a telex, often in terms of technology in the 70s and 80s. Member of the public, the police would send a telex through to the Home Office in London, and then they would choose whether to investigate it or not. But the reality was, of those cases that were sent, the vast majority of these pro formas were so poorly filled in. I would argue that 80 to 90% of them just got filed because there was a lack of information, and it was often down to the skill or interest, skill not being the right word, the interest of the police officer taking the report. And if now bear in mind we're living in this debunking world then, and for all these decades, if they thought people were crazy, they would generally take very little details, hence why there could never be any follow-up, and it was just a paper exercise. So when the likes of maybe Nick Pope, who was operating at the desk, says he got 300 reports a year, 90% of those 300 reports per year were just filed straight away. So he's maybe looking at less than 50 that he would make any kind of interest. He never left the office. He wasn't investigating that way. There was no money. There was no interest in the department where he worked. So there's a lot of misnomer information about what the MOD did. And certainly other departments within the MOD certainly did more than the office where, say, Nick Pope was, which was at the, in a sense, the public relations desk, that what was called the UFO desk. It was really just a public relations exercise, much akin to Project Blue Book, which didn't really, for many, many years, certainly from Project Sign was good. The first Project Grudge replaced all the people. Project Blue Book was hit and miss and largely miss. So the cases weren't really investigated that well because we're in this debunking world. So it was kind of like that. It was a public relations desk. But that's what happened with reports in the UK. They all went to the UFO desk for over 50 years, but 90% of them were just filed away.
Straight to Nick.
Information.
So this takes me to Rendlesham. So you have been researching Rendlesham extensively. Got into some trouble too, or some criticism, let's say that. Now,
the only criticism comes from the trolls and people who support the trolls. And it only really centers about one witness, who's called Larry Warren, who was the original military whistleblower. But the reality is during the course of my 4-year reinvestigation, I interviewed Adrian Bustinza twice, once on video. So like a 3.5 hour, 4.5 hour transatlantic call through the middle of the night. And I'm falling asleep by the end of it because it's during the night with the time difference. So I interviewed him. He was like the Holy Grail. I interviewed other people, Steve Longero, another American guy, who said that Larry Warren was there on the forest and he was out in the forest on the night he was involved in an incident, which people didn't realize. So the problem is that if it's Rendlesham Forest is a political case, unlike no other, apart from Roswell.
Yeah, but I was going to say Roswell too, but
Roswell is obviously uniquely famous because it's the alleged crash of what was perceived to be an extraterrestrial craft and the alleged recovery of bodies. But essentially, that is the story, and then it's a military cover-up.
Right.
Okay, that's basically the story. Rendlesham is much more complicated than that, and it's argued to be the second most famous case in history now, so you can put it alongside Roswell. And what makes Rendlesham really complicated, and it's hugely complicated just to put out in a couple of minutes, is the fact that you're not looking at one witness, two witnesses. You're looking at probably 50, 60, 100 witnesses if they would ever all come forward. Many more than that, probably.
And multiple governments.
And an incident that's played down by the US government, by the British government, played down by the US military, played down by the UK military and Ministry of Defence. But what makes it kind of unique is that 3 of the 4 principal military witnesses who went public. So you had Larry Warren, who was the original whistleblower, goes public with his name first for many years on his own. And then you have retirements by Colonel Charles Holt, Sergeant Jim Penniston, and Airman Jim Sergeant. He retired as a sergeant, John Burroughs, but he was an airman at the time. So you had those 4 principal witnesses. Well, what happened was, as soon as they retired, they all attacked Larry Warren, the original whistleblower, who'd been out on his own for about 7 or 8 years. So it's like, well, that's a bit odd. Witness taking another witness, taking another witness. Oh no, it didn't happen. Blah blah blah. So like when they retired, it's like they all basically jumped on him from a great height and said, no, it's a lot of rubbish, especially from Colonel Holt, who I had a 7 year collaboration with, working on a film script. So where it gets a bit different is that they all criticised the original military witness to say it can't happen. And yet all these years later, when I've done my 4-year investigation, I get Steve Longero, who says to me on a 3.5-hour transatlantic call, yeah, I saw him in the forest on the night I was out. Forget which night it was. It doesn't matter. The point is he's saying, I knew him because I trained with him.
He's placing him there.
He was on the same training course. So you know you. It's like you go to school in your class that you've been to class with for the last year or whatever. You're not going to recognize somebody out in the forest. Police says he's out there. So that's one. Yeah. And plus there's other incidents that he talks about that we don't even know about. So there's
Gary, as a police officer and you know, finding witnesses, you know that witnesses to a crime, say, you know, when you interview, say, 5 witnesses, they could have 5 different stories, right?
Absolutely. Everybody's got different perceptions of an event. You can have 5 people see the same event and they will all see it in a slightly different way. But essentially the same story, i.e. a burglar has broke or somebody has smashed into a car, would be the same. But where it will change is the height, the weight, the colour of the person doing it. How many there was, 1 or 2. But the essential story stays the same. And this is what the skeptics miss, is that they don't know how it works, really. And they try to come bamboozle the public by saying, no, they're all fallible. Yes, people are fallible. But generally, 5 separate people will see the same incident, but will give a slightly different interpretation. But the key story will be the same.
Yeah, the incident happened.
Yes.
Point. Yeah.
Yes.
That's it, right? I wanted to ask you something.
Yes.
There's a very similar story in the Netherlands, and I've talked about it in my podcast many times. Are you acquainted with the Soesterberg military air base incident?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a good incident, and there's been a huge cover-up. But what I'm saying that was different about Rendlesham is that the infighting between the witnesses, the military witnesses.
Yeah.
And then you've got to consider, why is there so much? And literally with Rendlesham, 3 people, 3 of the 4 key military witnesses to go on record have controlled the narrative for over 25 years.
Right.
And that narrative is wrong.
I think where you're going at with this.
Yeah, it's wrong.
Yeah.
So carry on about your Dutch case. But I'm aware of that case. It's a good case. But that's what makes Rendlesham different, is there's multiple agendas at play, and more will follow in the next few.
So do you think there's puppets being used in the Rendlesham narrative?
Yes.
All right.
Without a shadow of doubt.
All right.
Multiple agendas.
Multiple agendas. Okay. So disinformation puppets. So you're talking about like dozens of eyewitnesses, military and non-military.
There's probably been something like, to date, 25, 30 military witnesses who've gone on the record over the years, seeing various different things. We know for a fact that there are many more, because all the witnesses have said it. But because this case is shrouded in such fog of, it's 42 years ago this year. It's a long time ago. It's like Roswell. It's very difficult to equate something that happened in 1947. The Rendlesham people are still alive, but people are going to start dying off in the next decade or so, inevitably, because it's getting an old case. But what I can say is that I reinvestigated the case for a documentary called Capel Green for what turns out now to be over 4 years. That's a long time. And the documentary is still in post-production. It started off as a small project and grew and grew and grew. I think we're looking at over 60 witnesses now who've gone on record, or given interviews for the interview. Lots of special effects. It's whatever. It's now in the hands of the director, Dean Johnson. He's a professional editor. He's the one who has those skills. I don't have those editing skills. I wish I did in some ways, but I don't. So it's down with the editor. But from my own point of view, when I got involved in the documentary, And I already thought I knew a lot about Rendlesham because I'd got this collaboration period with Colonel Holt for 7 years, 7 years, working on a potential kind of Hollywood film script, because I've always seen it as it should be a film because it's such a good story, but it's complicated. And I thought I knew it, but and by all accounts, as regards to most people, I did know it. But in terms of what I later found out during a 4-year reinvestigation, because what I said was, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. So basically, I was the lead researcher for the documentary. So if I was going to put my name to it, I had to be right. So basically, I took the lead and thought, right, I'm going to go back to day one after the incident and see what I could find. Everything written, every newspaper report, every research paper that had ever been done, that kind of thing. And over the course of the 4.5 years, I've unearthed a lot of new material. Some came to us during the course of the filming, but I've interviewed lots of new people, and I've even got a new witness, a new military witness who's not even a police officer. And you know, this is dynamite what he's told me.
Now, Gary, this sounds very exciting, but is there something the general public doesn't know about the Rendlesham Forest you can disclose to us?
Okay, well, let me tell you this. All right, I believe that the incident occurs over 4 days now, not 3 days. We believed, and originally, when the Holt Memorandum came out in 1983, it referred to 2 incidents, a first night and then another incident 2 nights later. We now know that there's a second night, which was Bonnie Tamplin, and I now believe that there is a 4th night, which is to do with Adrian Bustinza, another incident for Adrian Bustinza that involves Larry Warwick on a 4th night. So there you go. So I know that. But if we actually break it down in terms of all the other incidents that I've researched over the last 4.5 years, we're looking at around 15 to 20 different UFO, UAP related incidents. And there's a lot more to come out. And what I would say is that of the 50, 60 documentaries that have been done for TV, they've done it for entertainment. They've never done it as a true evidential case. I've done it as an evidential review. And therefore, I've tried to leave no stone unturned as best you can. And I've turned up a lot of old evidence that should be in the public domain, but has never been shown in documentaries, and should have been, in my opinion, as a former detective of 19 years, should have been made aware to the public. And there's a lot of new material that will come out. And I think there will be, if there's any justice in the world, there will be a sea change of attitude to the way the Rendlesham Forest case is looked at by the end of 2022.
Now, if you're talking about new material coming out, is there any footage?
Not in terms of footage of a landed craft and things like that, but I do believe footage did exist, yes, of a landed craft. Yes, there is good circumstantial evidence from lots of multiple sources to say that there was footage taken on another night, which I now believe is the 4th night, not a 3rd night, on a 4th night of a landed craft surrounded by security police that was being filmed almost as if it was expected to be there. And there's multiple sources to say that that's likely to have happened.
Okay. Well, I can imagine that's the holy grail if you find that footage, right?
Well, let me give you a bit of a context to that. Certain researchers in America did some great research in the 1980s. One of those guys was called Ray Boucher, and he did tremendous work with his colleague at the time, MUFON colleague Scott Colburn. Never appeared. These 2 guys did fantastic research for about 18 months and never once have appeared in any TV documentary. Don't you find that a bit odd? That they put all that time in, and they did some of the best early interviews. They were the first people to interview the likes of Colonel Holt, the first people to find Adrian Bustinza, Sergeant Adrian Bustinza, the first people to interview John Burroughs. So they did some outstanding work, and yet their names are largely out of the UFO world, not known. Now, how can it be that some really good evidence that they found in the mid-1980s has never appeared in a documentary? And that's part of this agenda program that's going on. And the
That's
more
for damn sure it's going to happen now.
Well, all I can say is that I will present material that I think the public have a right to see, should have been shown for all these years, and the official story is not the official story. And I've also been told by a lot of military witnesses that they won't go public because of the existing narrative that's been spun for 25 years. And the people that controlled the spin were Colonel Holt, John Burroughs, and Sergeant Penniston, aided by Nick Pope. Those 4 people have controlled the narrative of Rendlesham for 25 years. And I guess, and you know, the trouble is why I've been trolled? Because they don't like me looking into what's really occurred. And so who are they going to go after? Somebody
because
going to rock the boat.
There is, of course, a story, you know, Mr. Penniston told. I think it was Mr. Penniston.
Oh, the binary codes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've probably summed it up quite well. Your face captures up my opinion.
Yeah, well, you know, it's too good to be true. It's almost like you know, like a Steven Spielberg movie or something, right?
Well, in terms of evidence, here's the thing. At best, it is a standalone event. Could it have happened? Yes, people can have downloads. I do believe people can have downloads of information in this crazy subject. But did it happen? We don't know. But he claims it happened, but it's a standalone account, not corroborated by anybody. Well, would you change the world on the account of one person's word? You wouldn't. So that's the credence. There's no credibility for it. It doesn't stand up to a test. And yet so many people have tried to make money out of it. Documentaries made, wow, this and that and the other. Why, you know, he said that he had this event within hours of his incident that he was involved in. He felt compelled to write it down, but he didn't tell anybody for 30 years. I find that as a detective not good. And then it comes out on the 30th anniversary, just when it so happens that there's a big documentary going to be made about the 30th anniversary.
Well, of course, you're trained to interview people and see if they're deceptive or non-deceptive, right?
And he doesn't do well on that scale.
I thought so.
No,
I thought you were going to say that.
And in all seriousness, I've met Jim Penniston. I have no desire to criticize him, but the circumstances, the binary codes, it's a standalone account. And in fact, I said to his co-author, Gary Osborne, because he wrote a book, Gary Osborne, I said it's a standalone account, and he had accepted that. And I said, at best, Jim should undergo a modern polygraph test and see if it stands up to scrutiny. There's only one person who's done a modern polygraph test, and that's Larry Warren. He passed it with flying colours. How's that? The original military witness who gets all criticised. He's the only one, and I was present in the preparation for that on the day it was taken. And the woman who did the test is Britain's top researcher, top polygraph examiner, and she said he passed with flying colours. And great charts, as she said. And so in that sense, if he wants to step up to the plate, let him do a modern polygraph test where you're hooked up to 5 different pieces of computer equipment and everything is tracked on a computer chart. Not easy. I wouldn't like to have done it. I don't think anybody would. But Larry Warren did it and passed it with flying colours. I'm just going to let the dogs out for a second because they make a lot of noise. Give me 5 seconds.
Sure. Wow. I think this is an amazing conversation. Guys, if you have a question for Gary, please chip in, man. I'll try to ask the question. And please use the super chat too.
I have to do this on every show because I share my study with 2 dogs.
Yeah.
One of them makes a hell of a lot of noise when she can't go her own way, and so she starts making yelping. So I've got to let her out.
Anyway. Yeah, I thought I heard a child crying in the background.
Yeah, no, that was just Daisy the dog saying, "Let me out, please."
I thought, if he makes children at 18 years old, why not now?
No,
just joking.
No, you don't want me to have a heart attack on camera.
No. So the reason why I touched down on the Dutch incident, because it has so many similarities to the Rendlesham Forest case, because these were also 12 Dutch military witnesses, also a shared military base with the Americans. At Soesterberg, now we know there were nuclear weapons.
Correct. Yep.
And
there's huge link between nuclear weapons, historical link, 50, 60 years longer. In fact, really to the 1940s. And if you think, most people cannot get their head around, people say, well, why Roswell? Roswell, New Mexico, at that time, middle of nowhere. It was only the world's first atomic bomb squadron. So I mean, if you got, I always liken it, if you get a dart, like you play darts and you think you're right, aim it at a circular globe and try to hit Roswell. What's the odds of it? Well, when you realize that it's the only place in the world that has an atomic bomb squadron, that's when you realize that UFOs turn up because they're interested in nuclear weapons. So Roswell was no coincidence.
New Mexico, Nevada, those were test grounds, especially at that time.
Trinity was obviously nearby, so this was a hotbed, and yet people don't make this connection to think, why Roswell?
Yeah. Also, 1947, 1945, Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Yeah. Well, I think that's I think most commentators on the UFO subject would say that that when we detonate the atomic bomb for the first time in 45, that we send a shockwave out into space, and as we listen for signals from other planets, why wouldn't they do that to us? And I think that shockwave then reached other civilizations, and they went, whoa, this planet has achieved the ability to do nuclear fusion. That has now the ability to destroy that beautiful world. And people say, well, why do they come here? And I go, well, I don't know, but I would hazard a guess that in our bit of cosmic neighborhood, we're a bit like the Great Barrier Reef. We're a planet where we've got masses of water, life, diversity, fauna, and it's an interesting place, a bit like we would go to Great Barrier Reef or the Galapagos Islands. Why can't we do this in a global, intergalactic kind of way?
For sure.
That's why they turn up. They're curious. They don't want to see us destroy this planet.
No, exactly. So in 1945, they found out the talking monkeys found a pack of matches. So that's also my theory. If it is true, I think that's very plausible. But so you are still working on your book too, right?
Yes, I am working on a book on Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah. And is there any time frame on publication or?
Yes, there is, but I'm not telling you.
Why not? Give me the scoop.
No, I already have given you lots. I've already given you lots.
I know you've been very generous, and thank you a lot, sir. But of course, everybody wants to read the book on Rendlesham, because as we just heard, there's probably going to be a lot of new information, which we are all very excited for.
There will be a lot of new information.
Yeah. So let's go back to ICER. What can we expect from ICER in the future?
Well, I knew at some point we were going to talk about ICER, and I'm more than happy to do so. But one of the things that I mentioned previously ahead of the show was that I wanted to break some very sad news.
Yes, go ahead.
That you weren't aware of, but I'd just like to pay tribute to Lakazar Filipov, who was our Bulgarian national representative, who sadly passed away on December the 20th, 2021. Big shock to everybody in ICER, an astrophysicist, a former son of a former Bulgarian prime minister, so very eminent person in his country, died at the age of 68. A tremendous loss, not only to science but obviously to ICER. So I just wanted to put, this is the first kind of radio show podcast that I've done since his death, so I just want to put it on record on behalf of ICER. Our thoughts go out to his family and pray, pay tribute to him, because he was also in San Marino, he was also in Barcelona, so I'd seen him just very recently and he looked well. I believe he's died of a heart attack at the age of 68. So a tremendous loss. Our thoughts go out to his family. And I kind of wanted to pay tribute because as an astrophysicist who I think was given an award at the same time as Carl Sagan from the space agency, from Moscow, basically, a very eminent astrophysicist, he for many years had been pushing the idea that there was extraterrestrial civilizations, and that put him in conflict with many of his scientific colleagues who, for all these years of stigma, who kind of just poo-pooed it. And yet he did this for over 20 years, and he was able to secure funding, and he put several UFO-related conferences together. I attended a couple of them myself. He had some very prominent people within the UFO community, and he was one of the very early pioneers as a mainstream scientist to listen to what I would say good evidential UFO material had been done by UFO researchers, and most people just wouldn't even entertain it, and yet he did. So I want to pay tribute to that, because he was a visionary in that sense, and I think that it's a tremendous loss, not only to science but to ICER, and our thoughts go to his family.
Amen.
Okay, so thank you for allowing me to do that. So ICER, lots happening. We launched publicly 25th of May. We always thought that this was going to be like the first 12 months is in a sense an establishing ourselves in the world, as it were, or hopefully near the top table or at the top table. Nobody thought that it was going to be easy, and it's not easy. We have to earn our place at that top table. But I think we are getting that global recognition now. We do something that's different. We're now, instead of 28 countries, 27 countries, because we just lost the Bulgarian representative, and we'll be seeking someone else from that country.
You can have 28 again. I'll be the Dutch one.
Oh, well, as daft as you sound, you are probably the top person in Holland at the moment in the public domain. There will be.
I'm sure. I'll take the job.
I'm sure there will be squirrels in the Dutch military who know a lot more, but that's the secret world. But in the public domain, who knows? We'll come back to that. But suffice to say that from an ICER point of view, this is still very much our initial phase. Now, what I can tell you is that, as you've seen, that we've done some very prominent conferences. In fact, the Barcelona conference, we had 11 national representatives there, which was huge. And the people who ran that conference were very supportive of ICER and what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to do is take a global approach. And it's a mixture of scientists, academics, and leading UFO UAP researchers. So we're a bit different. Now, where we kind of come from is we basically say, look, it's a done deal. We believe that over 70 years of research, this is a real phenomenon, which we now know is real, and we think it's likely to be extraterrestrial or non-human in origin. Now, on that basis, we've taken a global stance and saying, well, we are getting close to this paradigm shift. This most important subject in the world is going to hit reality at some point. There will be a 24/7 moment when it's on every news channel, and that's your big disclosure moment. We're heading towards that. Now, when that happens, if you have not done any preparatory steps prior to that, I think you're going to have a lot of social, psychological effect. Not on everybody, but there will be a natural proportion of the public who have been led deceptively for over 70 years that there's nothing to this subject, who are suddenly going to hit a brick wall. Oh, it actually is likely to be extraterrestrial, non-human, because we've ruled out everything else. That's what's likely to come.
Yeah, there should be a plan for that.
Well, ICER has the plan, because we're saying is we've got to start preparing people now. And so when we launched, we said that we're going to create awareness courses. And so we've been developing awareness courses. And one of the things that I wanted to give you an exclusive on is that within the next few days, I will be announcing, or ICER will be announcing, the first dates of its first online awareness course, evidential history course. So this is what we said we're going to do. Now, we are not a group. We are an NGO, an international NGO, non-government office, organization. And we're not for profit. We're registered in Portugal. We're apolitical. But we just want to bring attention to this subject. And our mission has always really been to take it to the highest levels of governance. And if we talk about San Marino, the key thing that made the news from San Marino was what's called Project Titan, which was an ICER and what's called Central Ufologica Internationale, CUN, the Italian group, co-sponsored with ICER, put in documents to the San Marino government. I was privy to be one of the 3 people who met with the culture minister, and it's basically to say, look, San Marino is a tiny little principal state, only 33,000 people, but it's one of the oldest states in the world, republics in the world, and many UFO conferences have been held there. And they have often sponsored the UFO group, the local organization, the local UFO group. But what the idea of Project Titan is, we think the timing is right now to say, look, it has to be a nation state that approaches the United Nations. People like me and you, or an organization, cannot directly reach out to the UN. It has to be a country going to the UN. So a nation state. So if San Marino agree to what we've submitted, which is a proposal that they approach as the San Marino government, the United Nations, and say, we would like a United Nations backed yearly UFO conference in San Marino. A bit like the Geneva Convention, something that you look back on, thing like that. And people have said the Geneva Review of Ufology kind of thing. And that's kind of where that idea comes from. But the idea is the genesis is over 20 years old, but the circumstances weren't right. Now, because of the change in circumstances since the New York Times, the Fleur videos, all the legislative things that have happened in the last 12 months or so, means that we think there's a much better chance now that the San Marino government will now look at it and think, well, this actually could be good for San Marino. It could put us on the map. It could bring us lots of tourism, and things like that. It could bring lots of jobs, new hotels, because it's suddenly, if it was backed by the United Nations, it would then make it a very important place. And plus it would make history within this subject. So if we go back to the Grenada Initiative in the 70s, Sir Eric Gairy, the UN debate that was then held, it's kind of everything was left on file, as it were. He got deposed within months of giving his presentation at the UN. So in a sense, the timing hasn't been right. But we think the timing is right now that a small country, still a country, probably less bureaucracy, can go to the United Nations and say, look, we think maybe the time is right now to give credence to this subject, and we would like San Marino would like to endorse this as a United Nations backed conference, make it like a headquarters for a yearly major international conference. And I think we're, we submitted it, we haven't heard anything back. I think they're still worried, like every other country, with COVID, etc., etc. But it hasn't been rejected yet, and we are hopeful that down the line, whenever that is, that they may think that this is the right time. And I think that, in a strange kind of way, if you saw Lue Elizondo in his presentation at San Marino, he said the next phase, in like phase 2, is to start reaching out to our international partners. And that was really his key. Next stage is going to be reaching out to an international community. And so I kind of hope that the San Marino government, that the United Nations may look at this and go, actually, this is not a bad idea now, that we, this GRG amendment now puts this legislation on the map, and it really is a serious topic now, and it can only get more serious as it gets more coverage. So I think the timing is potentially right for this crossover to say, we have to go get rid of the stigma once and for all, and now start reaching out to international partners. And what better way than to create this big international conference yearly and give it the backing of the United Nations? So we're hopeful that communications will take place, maybe with other governments, who knows? But hopefully that they will look at it in the wider context and now look at the evidence that's been created and put together over the last 4.5 years since the December the 16th, and think, well, maybe this is the time. We do need to address it at some point. It's never really been addressed because of all the stigma and hoo-ha that was associated with it. So maybe now is the time. And that's what we're hopeful. So that's a big thing that I said. We do have other kind of United Nations possibilities of going down different routes, but we have to see where this goes first. it might, if it was to be accepted, then we're into a new world territory, and that would certainly put ICER on the map globally. We're now getting mentioned as a global organization by certain, shall we say, publications that are online that are very powerful. So they're now recognizing that we're trying to do things on a global scale. And what we've tried to say is all along is you've got organizations like SKU, who are basically scientists doing great scientific work, but they're not ICER. You know, we respect what they're doing, and I'm sure they probably respect what we're doing. You know, we're doing it from different perspectives, but all for a common purpose, like bringing hopefully credibility to the subject. And we need to work now as a global community, because this is not doesn't belong to America anymore. It's a world phenomenon, and it has to be treated like a world phenomenon. And so we have to start looking at this as a one world, one human race issue. And we've not done that. So that's what makes ICER a bit different. So we look at it from the global perspective. Like we say, 27 countries, we're 28 countries now, 27 countries. We're always on the lookout for people who have done credible research. But because of the way this subject has been handled over 70 years of the stigma, it's hard to identify certain countries and credible researchers, but we are always on the lookout. I can tell you that there will be another big initiative going to be released by ICER within the next, I think, 6 weeks or so. It's already been approved by the Executive Council. It's a question of timing. But there is a big initiative coming out that will involve, shall we say, military witnesses. That's all I'm going to say on that. There are other things going on. There will be an announcement. Again, this is a bit of a success for your show. A bit of a lead is that we're in the process, or just have appointed, the first specialist advisor to ICER, and we'll be announcing details in the next couple of weeks of who.
Is it a scientist?
No, he is a military pilot. High-ranking military pilot.
Ooh, is he British or is he American?
What do you want? Do you want everything? He is not British. He is not American, and that's all you're going to get. But yes. So what we want to do is like any good organization. We want credible people who are very evidential to come on as advisors. And so that will be the advisor on radar, the advisor on military aircraft and things like that. So it's important that we choose carefully. We are there to be shot at. We have to be seen to do everything right. We're not in it for money. We're in it for the long-term aim of trying to achieve the breakthrough at the highest levels of government. So this is what ICE is about, and that's what makes us different. We're not a UFO group. We're an organization registered in Portugal who are there, going to be hopefully there long after I've gone and died, and people will take my place, and it'll still be going. But we're really the only one who's saying we have to start preparing the world now, because if you don't, it's going to cause huge psychological implications, much like and much akin to COVID. Nobody saw the pandemic come in, and then so many people then went into lockdowns in various countries. So many people then suffered mental health crisis as a result of that strange alien world of not being able to go out. So a proportion of public have suffered tremendously mental health wise, and this is likely to happen in this subject if we don't address it now.
Exactly.
We should be preparing people now.
Well, that's funny because one of my one of the guests I'm communicating with, or with his people, and I hope I'm going to get him on. No promises. I'm working on it, audience, but no promises. It's just I'm trying to get Jordan Peterson on my podcast, Professor Jordan Peterson, because I think he can give a great take on the human psyche if this were to be true, and what is going to happen when everything you thought to be true is going to be doubted, like religion, like everything. Our place in the universe.
What a lot of people don't realize, and you appreciate it, I appreciate it, it's the most exciting subject in the world for me, because if it's real, which I believe it is, then it changes everything. It changes every aspect of society, because it'll be the world before we knew ET was real, before they told us that it was real. And everyone even even the most ardent skeptic will realize that the moment when it is universally acknowledged that we are not alone, that it will be the most profound moment in human history. Nobody doubts that. It's only the interpretation. So if that moment comes, and I think it's coming within a matter of a few short years because of the momentum that's building, we are into a different paradigm. And yet for over 70 years, the world has pretty much conspired with itself to plant this stigma surrounding it, to debunk everybody, make everybody feel foolish. Well, if this turns out to be not a conspiracy in a mainstream world, after 70 years, people are then going to say, well, what else have you been lying about? If you've been hiding that for 70 years, what else have you been lying about? And I think that will, because if you think about it, America will not come out of this very well because they've been the architects of that secrecy. So America has, in a sense, a lot of baggage on this because they have controlled the subject pretty much since Roswell in 1947. So they're not going to come out of this well. But it needs to come out, and it just, I kind of always thought that it's a bit like apartheid, that when it finally the dam broke, that they had the Truth and Reconciliation hearing. So I think we should kind of do that in a UFO world. We don't want to send people to prison, but we just want people to say, look, I served under a regime that said I had to debunk it all, and they say it on record, and off they go. But let's just get the truth out there, and then let's move on. For the benefit of mankind. We don't want to put people in prison, but we should just acknowledge that there has been lies.
Well, I do, I do think that you taking the initiative to prepare people, if this were to be true, is divine work, actually, because you're ahead of the troops. Because the governments are not there yet by far.
No, not at all.
So Terry Ruckert, I thank you so much for your endorsement, sir. He has a question for Gary. When academia is mentioned, only physicists and technology-related fields are represented. Has anyone considered reaching out to other fields like behavioral science to look at patterns of behavior and other forms of data?
Quite by coincidence, I've been approached by a behavioral scientist who wrote to ICER, and I took the email. And he's quite an eminent person in his field, and he said you should be looking at behavioral science, and and I think this is an integral part of the equation. We don't have all the answers, but what we're saying is globally we now need to sit around a table, all walks of life. Let's get rid of the egos. Let's get rid of the baggage of stigma and just start talking to each other. And in a sense, you're starting to see that with the likes of Avi Loeb, but that's still very scientific laden. I personally, and this is my view, not an ICER point of view, my personal view is that there should be a member of ICER is like a UFO historian on the Galileo project, because they're all scientific, but they're not UFO researchers. And yet we've got hundreds of years of collective investigative experience with many of our researchers, top people like Don Smith, the top guy in Roswell in the States, Victor Vijani in Canada. We've got Susan Hansen, top researcher for 40 years in New Zealand. We've got some very eminent people in their field. And I just think that if you went into a library that's got 1 million books and you said, you just walked in and you were looking for a specific title, if you didn't go to the librarian and say, where is this book in your library, it would take you a hell of a long while to find that book in 1 million books. Whereas if you know people who know where to look, who know the evidence straight away, who can just say, well, that happened in 1972 and in that case happened, then that's the reason why I think that could be of benefit to the Galileo project, because we've got people like that with just a wealth of information that you can just put it like that. They don't even have to think about it because that's been their specialist domain. And I just think it would be a handy tool. And if you don't go to the librarian, you're missing a trick.
Yeah, that's true. So before I'm going to say goodbye to Mr. Gary Heseltine for this already iconic interview. Thank you, sir. we are going to show something. If you haven't seen the beginning of this episode, of this show, I have some footage I had been holding back for you guys, which is from San Marino. So my audience, please stay tuned, because tonight I'm going to upload the moment I am interviewing Lue Elizondo for the last time live in San Marino, where I met Mr. Heseltine too. It is when the NDA report came out live right then and there. Lue got it right there in on his phone. We got to talk to it immediately live in the YouTube podcast, my YouTube podcast. Now, when we finished that interview, there was someone listening in on our chat, and that was Gary. And him and Lue immediately started chatting with each other. It was looking at Ali and Fraser going at it. No, just joking. But it was very interesting to see these men, talking to each other. And
for the first time live.
For the first time live. And I caught it on camera. So guys, for the first time, I'm going to share that conversation with you, Mr. Heseltine and Mr. Elizondo. So stay tuned. I'm going to still have to upload it to YouTube because I had been editing just to the last minute I was going into this interview. But it will be up in about, I think, an hour. So, Mr. Heseltine, thank you so much for this great interview. And, well, I hope we get to do this very soon once more.
Anytime, Max. It's always a pleasure, and you're doing great work. So compliments to what you're trying to do. It's all part of the same story.
Yeah, I'm very excited for your ICER plans. It sounds incredible. So I'm gonna have to. We're gonna do this many more times. I have an instinctive feeling about that.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So to my audience, stay tuned. I'm gonna upload the Mr. Heseltine and Elizondo chat in San Marino within the hour. You're not gonna regret seeing that because it's amazing. And I'm gonna say goodbye for tonight. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.